Decent Sampler might be one of the more exciting things to come along in a while. Every now and again, you get a tool that kind of changes the industry a bit. And Decent Sampler is really one of those things that's been changing the sampling game a lot. But to understand Decent Sampler, you have to go back and understand Pianobook. Pianobook is a community started by Christian Henson of Spitfire Audio, mostly creative composers and sample makers. The idea being that you could find and download and share your own free sample libraries. Things that could be totally unique to you, things that could just be an additional sort of thing to add to your collection, even just a chance for people to kind of create their own first samples. The problem that Pianobook had pretty much right away was that the two main platforms that were common and supported were the EXS24 or Logic Sampler platform and Kontakt. Now, both of these are great platforms, but neither of these is free. For EXS24, there were other loaders that could possibly load the instruments, but it was a bit inconsistent sometimes. And for Kontakt, you actually had to own Kontakt. Anything usable in the free version of Kontakt has to be licensed with NKS, which is a very, very, very expensive process and costs per license. Not a sensible thing to do for free instruments which you're trying to share with people. So this is where Dave Hilowitz comes in. He's the hero of our story. Dave recognized that the vision of Pianobook was not being achieved because while Pianobook itself was volunteer-based and offering all these wonderful free sample libraries, and for people like myself who both run Logic and own Kontakt, was very accessible, there were a lot of people who still didn't have the option to play with all of these new fun little toys. And so he brought along his little answer, Decent Sampler, something which, as far as I know, he has programmed still entirely by himself. The great thing about Decent Sampler is that it is free. It is available on any platform. It works on every OS and even works on mobile, which is very special. I mean, Kontakt and EXS are not available on mobile. So it opened up the market even to people who are just trying to make music on their phones, which I imagine is probably a step further even than Christian had imagined when he started Pianobook. Now, if you watched the earlier video on the blind producer's problem, you'll have already seen me pull up Decent Sampler. In that video, I believe I talk about it kind of in comparison to Kontakt, and in a way, I would like it to compare to Kontakt, just for the feature-rich engine of Kontakt. But you could more accurately describe this as being Dave Hilowitz's answer to Sforzando, as it works a little bit more similarly to that. Now, it is important to note with Decent Sampler that it is a very young and very new project. There's a lot of features still getting worked out, there's a lot of new things likely to come. I can't begin to imagine that this is where Dave is going to stop. As you can see, I currently have an instance of Decent Sampler open now. This is the plugin in project in Logic, but it works standalone as well. Right now, of course, you've probably noticed our logo here. This is an instrument that I actually made quite a long time ago. I built it originally in EXS and eventually on Kontakt and now on Decent Sampler, all three of which you can actually download on Pianobook and our own website at truenorthaudio.co.uk. It's completely free. It's just a really old set of samples that I made with a drummer friend of mine in my living room. It's just kind of a proof of concept. There's no round robins, nothing special to it, but it is perfect for the really basic sort of setup with Decent Samplers. You can tell all I have in the UI is just mic levels. So if we take a quick little tour of Decent Sampler, all of this is the UI. This is all the stuff I've built for this instrument specifically, because just like Kontakt, you can script your own kind of interface. You have the browser section here. The browser section is really cool. You can go through your own libraries. These usually get saved in your own folder. You can pull any of these up, so You'll see this version of Turnagain with no UI. This is one of the kind of demo projects I was working on. That's still in there, but I can just delete that right out. Don't have to worry about it. These are a few of the other different instruments I have downloaded from Pianobook. There's quite a few more. I'm still getting them all organized. You can see it'll have a UI when you actually have one. This is the plugin store here. It's not really showing anything in the plugin version. But you'll see if I open the standalone and open up the store. Again, a lot of stuff that's going to be for free. But this is the kind of stuff that Dave and collaborators of the Decent Sampler project are actually selling. So you can download those with an account. And again, this works on mobile, so all of these you can download to your phone. Additionally, you have a master volume and a master tune. You have your whole keyboard and user interface down here. You have this file menu. Handful of useful things there, even for the developers like myself. It's all generally very straightforward, which is part of kind of the idea of it. And if you're wondering how they actually work, basically all you download is a folder of samples, which may also have the background image in it, and what's called a DSPreset file. And the DSPreset file is just a really basic script here that you can roll through, and it just tells the instrument where all the samples live. It tells them what groups they live in, what to do with those groups. For example, I have a couple of groups at the end here that are panned left and right, so in here you'll see that there is a like a group pan, group volume. There's tags, which you use to control these faders. That's how you basically tell the engine what's what. And then you have your basic interface block that just tells you what's where the controls are, what they do. It's all actually very simple, very straightforward, and I plan in the future to do some videos on kind of the not a programmer's guide to scripting, because I am, as I've stated in previous videos, not a programmer. I understand this stuff on a very basic level, but the beautiful thing about Decent Sampler is that it is all very simple, and even somebody like myself has pretty easy time going through and actually pulling what I need out of the manual and making it work. I had a little bit of headache putting this one together, but not enough of one to really worry. And you can kind of order them differently. Like if you look at Christian's Claustrophobic Piano, all the samples come first and all the other controls come at the end. It's actually pretty cool just how flexible Decent Sampler is under the hood. So the cool thing is, it works for things like drums. So I got the Turnagain kit up. You know, very straightforward. I can control all these different knobs. I can bring in more of the snare bottom if I want. I got these mono and stereo overheads. Cymbals are quite loud in those, though. I keep those down. You also have things like piano. This is the Claustrophobic Piano that Christian Henson himself made. It's a really cool kind of binaural piano. He's got a few different presets for it. It's just very intimate, very personal. The way that he's used the engine, you can see he's got this release trigger. You can hear that kind of pedal lift with the if I turn it just like way up. Very mechanical sound there. Another one of my personal favorites here is Dave Hillowett's Slinky Violin. It's basically a violin through a spring reverb, but it's built off of this Slinky you see here in the photo, just stretched across a room and mic'd from the other side, and paired with this room mic here for a little bit more intimacy. But if you take that out and just kind of listen to the Slinky, it's got this really kind of ambient feel. A little bit metallic as well. and a lot of other really amazing instruments like this on Pianobook as well. And these are just a couple of examples of things that you can do with it. Violins, pianos, drums. It handles anything from these kind of long ambient instruments to really short percussive instruments. And while it is very simple still, it is still very powerful under the hood. And being able to actually get free instruments on something like this, not have to pay for the platform or the instruments, is really a game changer. And it makes me excited to be able to share little kind of freebies with people without having to worry about that barrier to entry. Now, of course, for all that being said, because it's still being developed, there's a lot of things that you won't have. One thing you might have noticed is that there are only knobs and sliders. There are no buttons of any kind. For Turnagain, if you look at the contact UI for Turnagain, you'll realize that we have, mute buttons and phase inverters on all the channels there. We actually have our own custom UI elements, which you cannot do with Decent Sampler currently. You can do the background, and you can label it and kind of give it its own character, but you're still stuck with the default knobs and sliders. So I do hope in future to be able to do my own custom UI elements in Decent Sampler. I would also like to get multiple pages or tabs or content tables so that you can build much bigger and more complex instruments. That's a personal thing. And then, of course, as I've mentioned in my previous video on Blind Producer, it would be nice to make it more accessible in some way, but that is something that I am not personally knowledgeable enough of on a software side to know how to do. But it would be something that could be really cool to see. I think overall, though, Decent Sampler is a real game changer. And the fact that from my perspective, as somebody who makes sample instruments, and from an audience perspective, as somebody who might not use Logic or own Contact, that they can take these, stuff like this beautiful violin here, and actually use them on their own productions as I have. And so overall, I encourage anyone watching to go and grab Turnagain, join Pianobook, get involved there, get all the free amazing instruments you can.